um, on whether I was going to do a video on this or a stream, but I feel like enough has happened in the last couple hours, or at least the last 24 hours, that it's worth talking about. Because things are moving a lot faster than I really thought. Now, my prediction for how long Avdiivka was going to hold out for was actually too long. I was too short. I was wrong about that. I thought it was going to end sometime before the new year, although it's not too far into the new year, to be perfectly honest. And I thought that Ukraine would basically have to start negotiations by summer. So it remains to be seen whether that was like too short or too long. I don't really know at this point. It's we'll get into the situation. We'll get into how much longer it's going to take, and kind of my overall thoughts on the matter. So okay, so let's get into this. I'm just posting a link to this on my social media. If you haven't checked out my video from earlier today, I would definitely recommend that. I put a lot of thought into that, to be perfectly honest. Um, it, it was a lot of time just trying to figure out what was going on with the media, but I have my theory now, and definitely check that out. The video is called, no, it's not called Red Alert, it's called Why and How the Media Behaves How It Does. So check that out later. I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so the situation on the ground, we'll go to Deep State UA, the official map of the Ukrainian, well, not official map, but okay. So what's been happening? What's been happening? The title of the stream, In at the Death, is the final book in the Southern Victory timeline from Harry Turtledove, and I just like the name of it. I always thought it was kind of a cool name to conclude a long series of events. So put that up there, maybe. Okay, so what's been happening? So Bakhmut fell a little while, fell last year, and there's just been kind of very long, slow fighting within the Avdiivka area. This has been going on, I think. Let me see how long this has been going on for. Uh, um, this started in February of 21. So it started basically when the Russian invasion began, and it's just been kind of continuing. Avdiivka was one of the main areas that the Ukrainians were using to shell Donetsk and Donetsk City and other parts of the Donbass. Uh, Basically since 2014, and it's been built up for the last, well, 8 years when this started, to be a almost impenetrable fortress, and it represented the hope that someday they would be able to retake the rest of the Donbass. That this was their bridgehead. This is where they were going to go, and that would enable them to retake it. Now, it is also the linchpin of their defenses in this area. As you can see, it is on a major road artery. And it's more or less, you can kind of see the outline here of Donetsk, or is this Lukansk? I always get them mixed up. It's rough, man. I think this is Lukansk, but yeah, it really the borders are like there, and they need to capture this to just kind of finish the job. and accomplish, I guess, kind of what phase one of the entire operation was, which is retaking it. You can also see that it is pretty much in the exact center of the active front lines. The front's kind of frozen down here because of the Dnieper, but it's kind of the exact center. So Ukraine has basically been throwing everything it has left into Adayevka. Um, Me and anti-communists, please, Mr. West, may we focus on the Chinese? Um, we'll get to that in a second. Just having a sip of a drink. So they have just been rushing people in there. Now, this is Adayevka is probably the most fortified place on Earth, arguably. The Ukrainians spent about 8 years digging in. They had, I don't know if they had traps, but they had huge amounts of ammunition stores. Yeah, there's. Let me just. I just gonna click away from the chats. It distracts me. They have huge ammunition stores. They had fortified basically everything: bunkers, trenches, tunnels, more or less everything. Avdiivka is also an industrial city, so you had tons and tons of commie blocks. You had factories. It was a natural fortress. And the Russians have more or less been slowly trying to take it for a very long time now. They only really started to put their back into it in the winter. Now, why they were trying to do this is why they chose to do it when they did it is kind of complicated. So, it takes about 6 months to a year to train a soldier properly. Um, it takes 6 months to basically get them to a point where they aren't going to just get themselves killed. It takes about a year to make them effective. That is what people have told me, and that is um, my understanding. When I looked it up, if you add up basic training plus American Army infantry training, it's about 6 months, and that is just to get like the basics down. And then there's another half a year of like maneuvers and other stuff. The Russian army training is about a year as well. So Russia has not expedited the training of its soldiers. My understanding is they're more or less doing the full course. So what they've been doing is they did that partial mobilization, and they've been steadily getting recruits. Now you can believe it or disbelieve it, but the Russian government has stated that they have not had to do a mobilization since their initial one because they have enough volunteers joining. Now, that was in part because they had a very effective military recruitment campaign. They also dramatically boosted the benefits that were available for soldiers. So I think pay went way up. A lot of other benefits went up. So it was made very attractive to go into the army. Now, what I find kind of funny, I'm sorry if this is slightly getting off topic, but um, is the West like shit on them really heavily for this. They're like, "Oh, you can't get people to join the army. You're having to like do this recruitment campaign, and you're having to like pay them to join." It's like, well, it worked. People joined the army. You guys have like no one who's in your army. No one wants to. The UK is like can't recruit people. The US can't recruit people. All these countries are just a fucking disaster in terms of their recruitment. Okay, Russian. I'm just gonna play this because I think it's a cool video. Where is it? Uh, yeah. So this is the ad they made fun of for being like desperate and showing how they couldn't get anyone to join the army. So that was part of their recruitment campaign that was widely mocked in the West. But so once again, you can believe what Shoigu has been saying, that they've been having enough volunteers, or you can believe that they did a another round of mobilizations without telling anybody. From my understanding, partially what happened is the recruitment numbers are somewhat inflated because a lot of the conscripts who they activated decided to sign up when they were offered significant financial bonuses. The point being that Russia, even though it entered this war with too small an army, but it doesn't really look to me like they cut corners in ramping things up. They were more willing to wait and not launch offensives until they got the rest of their guys trained up, rather than just kind of throw them into combat to get slaughtered. The idea that that's the case is the opposite of the case. I mean, that is what the Ukrainians have been doing, and this is what the Western commanders have been saying. Ukraine, 3 days training, BBC. Yeah. So this was from last year. This is from far right pro Russian neo Nazi source, the BBC. So this was a let's see here. They're speaking to a these two guys were sent in. This 18 and 19-year-old were sent into battle with 3 days of basic training. That's not even enough to like learn how to shoot a gun. Um, so and there's other stuff like that, and they're talking about this mobilization, which isn't going to happen. And the thing is, even if they mobilized like 2 million Ukrainians, let's pretend that that's physically possible. They have no time. Like the front's collapsing. They don't have time to give these people anything requiring decent training. The Ukrainians had a decently trained army. It died in basically the Kharkov counteroffensive of fall 2022. And since then, they've been trying to play catch up. They've sent some people to the west, but it's just not enough. So the Russians have been waiting. They've massively built up their stockpiles of missiles. Now, what they did last winter, if you, we'll get to the actual FAF. I'm just giving you kind of a bit of a background. I know I've covered this all before, but I stream a lot, so people might not know. So they've been last winter they fired a lot of missiles at Ukrainian infrastructure. Speculation is the point of that was to get Ukraine to exhaust its air defense missiles, to exhaust their Patriots, their Books, their other ones, by attacking vulnerable and valuable infrastructure. Let me know if you can hear that. I'll see what I can do. It's the radiator behind me. Um, so now the Ukrainians don't really have air defense missiles left, and the Russian Air Force basically is unchallenged now. And they have been dropping, maybe just very briefly. So, what a glide bomb is, which is what the Russians have been really heavily using. So, an iron bomb or a dumb bomb is like your traditional bomb. It's like from World War II. If you've ever watched a World War II air movie, where they drop a whole bunch of bombs out of the airplane and they hit stuff on the ground. They're not particularly accurate. They don't have a guidance system. So a glide bomb is you have a conversion kit that's GPS guided that basically will turns it into a glide bomb. It takes a iron bomb, turns into a glide bomb, and it actually becomes fairly accurate. Iron bombs, they have a massive supply of these. They're big, and they can cheaply convert them. So it's basically given the Russians like unlimited precision guided missiles. And these glide bombs are like 500 1 ton. They're massive. So that was part of it. They trained up the rest of their army. They have been hitting Ukrainian infrastructure, Ukrainian military industrial complex, and basically just getting everything ready. So there's periodic speculation as to when Russia is going to finally attack. For the last, I guess, kind of 6 months, they've been pursuing what the Duran calls aggressive attrition. So that is where they will attack an area, force Ukraine to defend it, use their superior firepower to inflict massive losses. And then if it looks like it's going to cost them basically anything to take the area, they will just withdraw. And that tends to be what they've been doing. The focus has not been on taking territory. It's been forcing the Ukrainian army into the open where their massive superiority, 10 to 1, according to Zaluzhny, 10 to 1 artillery superiority and um, basically unrivaled air dominance means that they can just blow away whatever comes out. And there's not a lot the Ukrainians can do. The Ukrainians have been trying to replace their lack of artillery with drones. Once again, it's not as if the Russians don't have drones, and it's not as if they can't build them, but you just can't replace artillery with drones. They're different. You can fire a lot more artillery than you can drones. Um, you don't need someone to operate like every individual round coming out of the artillery. There's a lot of aspects of that's not enough. So that is what happened. Now, last spring, summer, fall, we had the counteroffensive. The counteroffensive was this wacky idea that they were going to just surge forward. They got like millions of shells, all these Bradleys, these Leopard 2s, these Challengers, stuff like that. And we're just going to surge forward. The Russians had spent like the better part of a year building defenses. I don't know if that was because they were just trying to buy time to get the rest of their army online, or if they were pretty sure the Ukrainians were going to counterattack at some point. It was like 6 layers. We had massive minefields, ditches, dragon's teeth, bunkers, all that kind of stuff. If you recall any of the footage from that, basically the Ukrainian army initially was trying to do combined arms warfare, which is what the U.S. ordered them to do. So they were just riding massive like armored formations, basically into minefields, with no air support. They switched to infiltration tactics later on, but the U.S. got really pissed off about that and blamed them. So that was a complete and total disaster, and that exhausted most of their military equipment. They burned through almost all of their remaining shells doing that, air defense missiles, stuff like that. Another thing that the Ukrainians have been doing a lot is they waste quite a bit of weaponry on basically terror attacks. To be perfectly honest, like they fired, I think it was like 5 Storm Shadow missiles at the headquarters of the the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which I don't think that the Russian like Navy officers are meeting in like an unfortified building that everyone knows where it is. I kind of feel like if they were having a meeting, it would be either by like video, deep within Russia, or in some like fortified bunker or something that can't easily be hit. And I forget how many Storm Shadows they got, but that was like this really highly advanced cruise missile. But they just wasted like 6 of them on that. They're hitting these like landing ships, which aren't even really relevant. But they're like, we sunk this ship. It's a win. There was recently also they shot down a couple. I forget what type of aircraft it was. They shot down probably 1 Russian jet fighter, but they claimed it was like 5, and stuff like that. Also, they've been firing randomly. I think to me the thing that kind of changed my mind a bit about what I called the Russian victim narrative was they were still firing shells at Donetsk um, until very recently. Like they kept just bombarding it, even though they were out of artillery shells and they didn't have anything to fire anywhere else. They were still just like wasting what they had left, hitting civilian markets, stuff like that, just out of spite. Um, which it's I don't know, it's rough. If you have no weapons left, why are you firing them at civilians? So, this is the context. Ukraine has been through, I think, three armies. Their initial army got pretty badly beat up. They managed to stop the well, sort of. It's a bit more complicated than that. They stopped the Russians. They launched the Kharkov counteroffensive. They recaptured all the territory in green, which, I mean, they retook a lot of territory, but it was a massive. It was a mass. It took an immense amount of damage. They then did Bakhmut, which they refused to withdraw from and just kept throwing men in. Bakhmut was kind of intended to be. We've talked about this. We talked about this. It was initially the Russians were not going to storm it, but Prigozhin wanted to be a hero, so he charged into a heavily defended position and got a lot of the Wagner guys killed. But Ukraine kept throwing soldiers into there even after the Russians had basically encircled it. The spring offensive used up the remainder of their equipment, and since then they also had the genius Krinky bridgehead. Where's the Krinky? So they crossed the Dnieper in boats here, and they just kept sending like dudes over there. Um, they got one Su-35. I think that was it. No, they didn't kill the AWACS. No, like the AWACS actually wasn't shot. As far as I could determine, the AWACS was not shot down. It was damaged, but it wasn't. It wasn't actually destroyed. Um, and that's my understanding. Now, in order to do that operation, they had to like bring up like their Patriot missiles to the front line. They got all this intelligence from the U.S. I don't think that the wreckage of any of this has ever been recovered. So there's no actual evidence that the AWACS got shut down. Now that's a very expensive scouting plane, from my understanding, with very advanced like sensors. If it was shot down, I'd say it was shot down. But I have seen a lot of people argue that there's no real evidence that it was. That they just kind of claimed that. Part of the issue is the Russians don't announce things. So, like when they asked them about it, they gave like a vague. I think when they asked the journalist asked Shoigu or whoever, he's like, "We don't have any." No, no, sorry, it wasn't Shoigu. It was Putin's spokesman. Did the AWACS get shot down? It's like we haven't received any information indicating that. So it was like this vague non-answer. But that's generally speaking how they do it. When Russia is releasing their weekly reports at the moment, there is no information about Avdiivka in them, no information about troop movements, casualties, anything like that. They tend to go radio silent and not announce things. If they're going to do an offensive, they just do the offensive. They don't release a fucking trailer, which I don't know. Maybe that's just naive. But anyways, so they the Krinky Bridgehead, they lost a lot of their, I think all their Marine divisions basically died here. The idea was they were somehow going to land at Krinky there, and then they were going to drive all the way across and all the way across and cut off Crimea, get through like all these Russian fortified lines, and they thought that that was somehow going to happen. So, back to Avdiivka. So, basically, the situation getting, sorry if I went on for like 25 minutes about the background, but I think it's important to kind of understand the situation that we're in. Now, there is the ongoing issue of USAID. The USAID package ran out in January or the end of last year, and they've been trying to get one passed. Brandon and all of his ingenious offered the Republicans a deal that he would, if they would pass his foreign aid package for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel, then he would include the border stuff in it. That he would include like border funding for a fence or to close down the border. In the various versions of the bill, it was like the most just retarded thing I've ever heard. It was like if certain crossings had more than 5,000 illegals a day, then you can maybe close them down. Um, so yeah, so then they took that out of the current version of the bill. So there's nothing about the border in that. And they just said, look, you're going to just have to give all this money to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. Now, I'm going to say something that might piss people off. I actually am not against military aid to Taiwan, personally. I think you shouldn't provoke China, um, but I am sympathetic towards the Taiwanese. I'm a lot more sympathetic towards them than I am towards the Israelis. Uh, I think the current Taiwanese government is extremely irresponsible in trying to provoke mainland China. I think, though, that they could come to some sort of understanding that preserves Taiwan being autonomous while legally sort of being part of China, but without the Beijing actually controlling it. Um, yeah, Taiwan is kind of paused. The thing with Taiwan though is the public was against it, but the Supreme Court forced it through. So Taiwan legalized gay marriage through the Supreme Court. There was a referendum that was against it, and then they like re-legalized it or something. The point is, I'm more sympathetic to Taiwan than the other parties. But anyways, so they're trying to get the 68 or however many billion dollars to Ukraine, and that's just been held up. And now um, we have Biden saying that the what is it the betrayal of Ukraine will never be forgiven. Yeah, I think he said like I don't see it there, but it was something like that. It was the betrayal of Ukraine will never be forgiven, and they said the entire war is failing. All this stuff is happening because the Republicans won't pass the $68 billion or however much it is. Now, keep in mind, the U.S. has given well over $100 billion. I think if you actually go through at the end of this and figure out the total value of shit that they've given Ukraine, it's going to be like way, way more. Because there was a lot of weird accounting shenanigans that went on with this. Like, a couple times, they found like $5 billion that they underreported or something. Um, and kept doing stuff like that. So what was I saying? And I lost my train of thought there. Something about the bill. Yeah, this yeah, so there's that recently they have been getting the EU passed like a $50 billion uh a $50 billion funding thing. Orban, the EU Council basically declared war on Hungary and announced that they were going to publicly try to destroy its economy. Now, this is not like me making it up. The Financial Times announced this. Far right, pro Russian source, Financial Times. And it was pretty obviously leaked by the EU Council as a way to try to screw Hungary over. And they also said that Hungary was going to have its voting rights taken away. And the EU is withholding something like $40 billion from Hungary. So Orban was like, his conditions for funding, passing the funding are A, we need an audit. B, we need to review this every year. And C, I want the money that you illegally stole from me. So the EU said that that was against EU values, and then they released the article saying that they were going to basically break Hungary's thumbs unless they went along with it. So Orban just wound up voting for it. Um, they also voted to get Ukraine to begin accession talks to the EU. Orban said that this was a really bad idea, and they basically threatened him there. And then he just said, "Okay, you can have the vote. I'm going to go get a coffee," and he just left the room. He's like, "This is a really, really bad idea." So that stuff happened. Okay, so the EU money's there. Now the question is, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of all over the place. There's a lot of stuff to cover. The question is, would this money matter? Is Joe Brandon correct? If only the $68 billion had been passed in January, um, would this have happened? Uh, Here's the thing. So when there's always often a scene in like post-apocalyptic movies where someone has like gold or money, or there's that scene in 28 Days Later where they take all the stuff from the grocery store and he just throws his credit card like on the counter, and he's just, because it's like money doesn't matter anymore. There's no purpose for money in like a state like that. And I mean, it's true, you can't eat gold, stuff like that. um the problem is that there's just nothing to buy with it. Like, the US emptied out a lot of their strategic reserves. They had to go to South Korea and like borrow the 500,000 shells that they're going to have to pay them back. They had to dip into their stocks. The EU had to dip into their stocks. They gave away like large amounts of stuff like that. And it's not even a question of the money. Like, if the money could make a difference, then they probably would, but there's nothing to buy with it. The amount of weaponry that Ukraine needs is just something that the Western countries don't have. Um, and you just can't get it for any price. It's like, I want to buy this, but we're out of it, sir. I'll pay you 5 times as much if you give me this. Well, we just don't have it in the store. So that is kind of the issue. Is most Western countries had their armies designed, at least since the end of the Cold War, to fight insurgencies in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff like that. They don't have the capacity for industrial warfare that they used to. Now, this could probably be rebuilt, but the issue is a lot of the what they had was just leftovers from the Cold War that was just kind of sitting around, and the U.S. had to basically just give all the reserves of that, go into like their allies and take all their reserves, and stuff like that. So that's the issue. It's They could give Ukraine $1 trillion. They could give Ukraine $5 trillion. There's nothing that they could really buy. It would help in that it would enable them to pay the soldiers and pay the pensioners and pay the civil servants. I'm not saying the money wouldn't help, but the idea that the military situation would be completely different if they had money, um, is just wrong. Like, it's just the U.S. doesn't have anything to get. The U.S. and like, I mean, they have some stuff left. Obviously, they have some stuff left, but the U.S. has a lot of they're dealing with. They're dealing with the Israel thing. They're dealing with the Houthis. They're dealing with possibly China. They're the people in Europe are talking about how Russia's going to invade. They have a lot of shit to deal with. And there's only so much they can give to Ukraine. And keep in mind, they did give Ukraine hundreds of billions of dollars, like hundreds of tanks, air defense missiles, stuff like that. As I've said many times, probably the most emblematic example of this is 600 Patriot missiles are produced a year total. And that is for the entire world, including the US, all of its allies, the Israelis, the Germans, the Greeks, and Ukraine. And the Russians in some missile strikes will launch hundreds of missiles. So it's just they don't have the capacity to do anything. Even if they gave them everything possible, they just can't. Russia has kept its industrial capacity and it is organized and because the military industrial complex is state owned in Russia, they were able to basically keep it more or less in reserve, so they had a surge capacity, and they've just been building it up because they didn't export their entire industry to China. So, like I said, it's Russia is outproducing the entirety of the West collectively, like 10 times over in terms of artillery shells, tanks, stuff like that. So, where does this put us in terms of FDF? My point is, the Ukrainians don't have anything left. Like, we're surrounded here. They kept throwing more and more troops in what was left of their military equipment, and recently they basically committed some of their last remaining reserves. So if you guys remember Azov, the Azov battalion, this is like Azov 3.0. They got destroyed at Mariupol, then they got destroyed at uh, during the spring offensive. So we're on Azov 3.0, the 3rd Assault Brigade. Now, they are the best remaining unit in the Ukrainian army by all accounts. They have, I think they have Bradleys. I'm not sure if they have tanks, but they have the best equipment. They are composed of, well, obviously, like Ukrainian ultra nationalists. They have the best training. They were kind of a Praetorian Guard of sorts. Now, there's been speculation that Zelensky is deliberately trying to get them destroyed because they're Banderites and they're sympathetic towards Zelensky. So if he can get the people who might be Zelensky loyalists killed, then he won't have to fear them in a potential coup later on. So there's that. So they showed up, and the Azov boys describe on their Telegram channel put out that it was hell, that it was the worst thing that they'd ever seen, that the whole thing was a total disaster. Because, like I said, Russia's been gradually advancing. If we want to talk about like schizo tunnel theories, there was like a tunnel or something that like went through part of Avdiivka that the Russians just like found, and then they sent a bunch of guys through the tunnel, and then they were able to get like back behind the Ukrainians, and that was like the breakthrough, combined with the fact that they just have massively increased their bombardment. And like I said, it was decided fairly early on that Avdiivka was not going to be abandoned. Now, part of why I think Zelensky got removed is because he actually wanted to withdraw. He thought it wasn't defensible. Yeah, the old sewer in the south. I like to think that it was made by Chabad Jews, that was like part of that. That was they spent months to evacuate. Well, I think they brought in Chabad ultra Orthodox Jews, and they're the ones who made it. That's my schizo theory. Um, yeah, they don't also Soviet. Basically, they outmaneuver. Yeah, no, the tunnel in Manhattan was all the way under the Atlantic Ocean, and it went all the way to Avdiivka. That is how they got through. It was kind of weird because those two stories came out like within weeks of each other. But anyways, so they did infiltration. They brought in a bunch more guys. They brought in a bunch more stuff like that, and they've just been closing it. And Zelensky has been completely unwilling to retreat. He's taken kind of um, the not one. Yeah, we'll get to this in a second. The not one step back thing, and they just kept throwing soldiers in. So what's happened is a lot of Ukrainian soldiers. I don't think Charlemagne. Maybe you know. I don't think they've given the order to withdraw yet. Um, there was like no plan. They just thought Azov was going to go in, and I think they brought a bunch of other like strategic reserves up, and they're like, we're going to counterattack. We're going to counterattack, and we're going to kick the Russians out. But I don't think there's been an order to withdraw. So the Russians are just rapidly overrunning territory. The guys are in, I think it's the filtration plant and the coke plant, and there's a couple other factories. And they tried to retreat. No, I know the Ukrainians are withdrawing. I wasn't sure if like Skrinsky or whatever his name is has announced a withdrawal, or they're just withdrawing in kind of a panic because they've just broken and it's every man for himself. Because I wasn't sure if the Ukrainian general staff had actually announced that they were withdrawing yet. And with Azov, it was I heard rumors that they were told to attack and they refused to, and then they said we'll cover the withdrawal. So I'm just that could be the case, but I'm hearing a lot of different stuff coming in. So I'm not sure if that was the original purpose. I'm not sure if they've announced the retreat yet. So because they left it so late. Uh, they're getting overrun. They're in these like foxholes basically. There is a story I heard where they were trying to break out of. I think it was the filtration plant and like run out of the city, and just the Russians just fired like this massive bombardment, killed like 60% of them. The rest of the guys went back into the factory. They're all basically completely pinned down. What's left of the Ukrainian army, uh, it's total chaos. Zelensky is on vacation. He decided that he was going to leave the country. He's currently in Germany and France, and he's going to go to the Munich Security Conference. Because why would he need to be in Ukraine while this is happening? Why would you need the president um, to be in command and make decisions and decide strategy when like the biggest battle of the war so far is ending in a disastrous conclusion. Now, this is something that almost always happened: is Zelensky leaves the Ukraine whenever there's a major disaster. Now, whether that's because he just doesn't want to deal with it, if he's afraid he's going to get cooed, I don't know. But he's in the Munich Security Conference. Um, yeah. Just a side note, Azov, for those of you who don't know, are Ukrainian neo Nazis. Uh, I will say this about them. I've made fun of them numerous times in the past, and I don't agree with their political ideology, but I will give them credit for being brave. I have tried my best throughout this entire conflict. I will shit on Zelensky, I'll shit on Zelensky. I have nothing but respect for the Ukrainian soldiers, who I think have fought harder and longer um, than anyone could have reasonably expected. I don't think anybody expected them to hold out as long. They're trying their best with minimal training. The fact that they keep getting defeated is not their fault. There's no shame in losing to a superior opponent. Um, Especially when you're led by morons who base everything on Marvel movie logic. So I just wanted to say that. I know somebody complained that I say that too often, but I just want to stress that I do not take pleasure, even if I make fun of it, even if I get excited about it. I don't take pleasure in like the Ukrainians dying. It's really sad. And Azov are Spurgs, but I'll give them credit. They put their money where their mouth is, and they're fighting on the front lines against just a tidal wave. So I think personally, Zelensky, if he has any soul left, should just tell the people in Avdiivka that they can surrender. Like, they aren't getting out of here. Uh, they aren't going to be able to leave. Just they have no resources left. They don't have food. They don't have medicine. They're hiding in these bunkers. Like Zelensky just needs to say, just surrender, guys. This is I played this earlier, but we're going to take a look at this again. We're going to look at a scene from Waterloo, and they'll probably get a copyright strike, but it'll be worth it. Uh, this is kind of how I feel. This is actual footage from Azov. This is footage of Azov.
Brave Frenchman, you have done all that the honor of war requires. His Grace the Duke of Wellington invites you to save your lives. Will you agree to surrender? Merde!
That's what happened with Azov. By the way, that's from Waterloo. I often will use clips from it. I definitely recommend if you haven't seen Waterloo. It's one of the best war. It's arguably the best war movie of all time. I also think it's the definitive movie about Napoleon. It's don't go see the Ridley Scott one, but watch Waterloo. I'm pretty sure it's up on YouTube. But anyway, so I just think they should surrender at this point in time because they aren't going to get out of there. There's nothing they can do. The guys have done their duty. You can't say that the Ukrainian soldiers holding Avdiivka have not like gone above and beyond for their country. And I'm actually tearing up because it's really it's actually I'm tearing up because it's just so sad to see like I haven't watched the footage but I've been reading about it and just there's corpses everywhere. The guys are trying to run away. The Russians just shoot them down as they run. It's just such an unnecessary bloodbath. Like just let the guys surrender. Like it's over. It's over. But so what is going to happen now that Avdiivka's fallen? The Ukrainians are probably going to lose somewhere, but we don't even know about the numbers, but they might lose up to maybe like 10,000 more people as prisoners. They didn't order their people to withdraw in time. They're encircled, so basically everybody left there is either going to die or get captured. That's more or less where we are at this point. Um, so where was I again? So what now? Azov is getting slaughtered. I think they sent some of their other brigades in. They're taking immense casualties. What is Russia going to do now? Well, there's been a couple suggestions. 1,000 plus prisoners. Yeah, I've seen estimates between 1,000 and 6,000. They have up to 4 to 7K troops trapped against 40K Russians. Yeah, like I said, it's hard to get information. The estimates I've seen were something like 2 to 8,000. So that's about what you had, Grizz. I'm not sure how many have gotten out or how many have died. That was from like 2 or 3 days ago. But that's a lot of guys. That's a lot of guys who are getting just wiped out. So what happens next? From what I've heard, and this is from Ukrainian sources, there are literally no more fortifications of any significant amount between Adbayevka and the Dnieper. There's nothing. Like, this is all just basically empty space. You don't have like what the Russians had. I don't even know if there's any more big cities that they can or like, I guess maybe, but basically once that's gone, there's just nothing. Like, the Russians can just go west until they hit the Dnieper. Um, the original plan was that they were like, well, we're gonna hold the position here. We're gonna set up a whole bunch of like heavily fortified lines to the west of it, and then we're gonna move there. But I could be wrong. My Charlemagne, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is they did not actually build any fortifications to the west of it. And it's just basically like, keep in mind Ukraine is a steppe. Just a massive like open plain. There's some forest and swamps and stuff, but it's very flat ground. That's why it's so fertile. Um, in the like 8 years they held the city, they apparently didn't think to make like a fallback position to the west of it. So once this is gone, it's just they can do that. Now the question is, and this will determine how much longer the war is, what are the Russians going to do? They don't have any stronger fortifications to the west as far as we know. Yes, no, Surovikin line equivalent. It's not even that they're stronger than FDF. I don't think they have anything. They never because Zelensky basically said they can never withdraw, and part of never withdrawing is no backup plan. Like, there was no backup plan. They like, when they withdrew from Bakhmut or whatever, they just immediately started counterattacking. Um, like, there is no. There are I know there are some, but there's nothing significant. Is my understanding. Obviously, they can dig some trenches, they can set up some stuff, but they have no time, especially now. They really should have started that like 6 months ago. We'll get to the Dnieper thing because I've heard some people argue against that. Um, Also, if Russia wanted to and they wanted to launch an offensive, I mean, these guys still have to get out of the rest of this area. They're going to have to retreat all the way, like, out of here while getting hit by artillery and missiles and stuff like that. So the question is, what is Russia going to do now? They've been attacking all along. If we just go down and look at this, they have been attacking all along the front. It's a very slow, plodding, methodical, grinding operation. We haven't seen any big aero offensives basically since the start of the war. But as you can see, they are gradually making progress. So the question is Ukraine withdrawing from Avdiivka? It's complicated. I don't know if there's been a formal withdrawal order. Maybe someone in chat could look that up just because I can't at the moment and let me know. But it's basically complete anarchy there. No one knows what's going on. Zelensky left the country to go on one of his tours to beg for stuff. Sersky, I don't think knows what the hell's going on. Either it's basically just kind of complete chaos. So the next semi-defensible place that they can really go at this point in time, yeah, is to the Dnieper. But I mean, let's just look at it. Look how big. Well, the Dnieper is the entire length of the country. Actually, it's more than the length of a country because it goes out like that. So if Ukraine was to withdraw to the Dnieper, they would have to defend this entire front line. And I think that's Like the front line is big at the moment. I'm sorry, I can't really tell how big this is. Oh, okay. There's a distance measurement. Let's see here. So the current. Just trying to get this to work. Click on the map to add the first point. Okay, so that is something like the current front line is like 200 miles. It's obviously going to be significantly more than that. Now, Kiev is not on. Well, Kiev is, I think, half on one side of the Dnieper and half on the other. It's kind of like withdrawing behind. It's not really going to help them much. Um, Also, and so it doesn't like they don't have any fortifications on the other side of it. So that's number one. It's not as if there's like some big fortification line they can withdraw to. I'd imagine they're going to have to abandon a lot of their heavy equipment if they get pushed. They don't really have the artillery shells or the other stuff to hold it. It's a massive front line. The other problem is Ukraine is not viable without the eastern half. My understanding is the eastern half of the country is where all the industry is. I'm not sure if it's where the agriculture is, but the wealthiest parts of Ukraine, other than Kiev, from my understanding, let me see here. Oblast by GDP per. Yeah. So this is what the income. This is what is this 2008? Yeah, roughly speaking. So as you can see, the industry and I think a lot of the agriculture is on the wrong side of the river. Let me see here. Here we go.
Hey! O'Connell! It looks to me like I've got all the horses!
Hey, Benny! Looks to me like you're on the wrong side of the river!
That's one of my all-time favorite movies. That is The Mummy from 1999. If you haven't watched it, watch it. Amazing movie. I love it. Once again, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But I think I actually had The Mummy in my list, like top 10 favorite movies. So, what is Western Ukraine going to do if the East, if they cede everything? Like, also just let's see here, Oblast by population. So, uh, Dnipro. So I'm not sure where all these places are. Okay, so like I think all of the most of the really heavily populated ones, or at least a lot of the population, is in the eastern part of the country. So it would be a short term fix. Now the overall the biggest single problem is Ukraine and America and the EU and all these people have said there can be no negotiations with Russia. There can be no negotiated peace. We have to take back every square meter, including Crimea, that has been lost. And Zelensky passed a law basically to prevent them from even negotiating, and that's still in effect. So it's not even really being talked about anywhere. Um, but so I don't know what they're going to do at this point in time. They aren't going to surrender. There isn't going to be a negotiation. They're losing their last fortified point. They've committed some of their last decent strategic reserves. What is left for them to do? Like I honestly, and I'm not saying this like as a Russia shill or anything. I'm just saying this like, where are they gonna? They can withdraw and abandon half the country. Keep in mind that if that half of the country gets overrun, they can't recruit from there anymore. They can't collect tax revenue. Whatever industry is there is completely lost to them. It's but there's no talk of surrender. Like it's what I think should have happened, and I've been I think fairly consistent about that. Is after the initial invasion, um, Ukraine should have just if they were going to do the Kharkov, because I can kind of see the Kharkov counteroffensive at least stabilize the front line. After that, they probably should have just dug in, um, built the equivalent of the Surovikin line, and just bloodied the Russians and tried to get peace on decent terms. Make it to the point that it wouldn't be worth it to the Russians, except that Donetsk and uh, except that this part of the country is just lost, and there's nothing that really can be done realistically to get it back. And people will say, well, but Arjun, isn't it heroic for them to just fight on to the death? And like, well, you can argue that, but it's all it is really going to wind up doing is just get the country completely destroyed. At the beginning of this war, if they had have surrendered, like negotiated, they would have only maybe I think they would only have lost Crimea. I don't think that Donetsk and Luhansk was even going to go to Russia. I think they were going to be like a special autonomous zone or something. But Boris Johnson came in and said, "You'll get everything. I'll make all your dreams come true." Let's see, I think it was a Napoleon Dynamite.
If you vote for me, all of your wildest dreams will come true.
Yeah. So that's more or less what Boris Johnson told them. So so you can blame the Russians for this, and to be fair, I mean they are the ones who invaded the country and completely destroyed it. But I think they can hold out for 6 million more years. But at the same time, let's just take a look at this from Putin's perspective. I think Russia would have accepted a neutral Ukraine. And I think Ukraine could have had a good deal as a neutral country, um, and done what Yugoslavia did or done what Finland did and trade with both sides. Um, Russia was willing to let they were willing to consider NATO membership. Sorry, not NATO membership, EU membership for Ukraine. That was on the table. That might have been part of some sort of negotiation, but never NATO membership, and it was always going to be a neutral country. Now, whether you think that that's bullshit and Russia was always going to invade and retake parts of the country, I don't know, but that is what the narrative is, and that was not permitted, and it led to there was Euromaidan. They started killing civilians in the eastern part of the country. They tried to come to a couple different agreements. From Putin's perspective, the West never lived up to any of them. Once again, if you can say that that's true, you can say that that's not true. The whole thing's very complicated. But from his perspective, he didn't. Now, kind of to me, what the final chance for peace was when the Kiev offensive happened. There was not a serious attempt really to take Kiev. They had like 30,000 people, 30,000 soldiers to take a city that big. Um, Uh, I think the idea was to surround Kiev, hold it hostage, and force a deal. Now, Germany and France, and this came out during the Putin interview, and I've heard this other way, lots of other places, including from Ukrainian sources, asked as a gesture of goodwill before the Istanbul Accords went into effect if Russia could withdraw from Kiev as a goodwill gesture, and Putin said, sure. And they withdrew from parts of Kiev and some of the territory they overran. Now, from my understanding, Angela Merkel came out after that and said, "Ha ha, we fooled you." I think that she actually said something to that effect, like we fooled Putin. Now, once again, you can think Putin's delusional or whatever. I do honestly believe that he feels personally betrayed. From my understanding, he did legitimately consider Angela Merkel his friend. They would send each other Christmas presents. He actually did consider her a friend. And he did have a lot of affection for the German people because he was stationed there during the Cold War and he speaks fluent German. And he feels that these people who, and he said this during the interview, that he liked Bush, he liked Clinton, he got along with them okay on a personal level, but he feels that they snaked him. Now, you can, once again, I'm just saying what he thinks. You can say that that is complete bullshit and Putin snaked them first, but um, I think what happened, and this is kind of an issue we see like all throughout the world, is after the Cold War, the US got high on its own supply. They said, we're the hyperpower now. We can do whatever we want. We don't have to negotiate. We don't have to come to agreements. We don't have to have spheres of influence. We don't have to have any of this stuff. We can just do whatever we want with not just with no consequences and no compromises. Like I do, to the best of my, and I'll repeat this, and I say this often, I do legitimately think if after the Soviet Union had collapsed, if America and the EU had done a Marshall Plan for Russia, if they'd come in and said, um, "Look, it's over. Communism's gone. That the Bolsheviks are gone. Here, man, we're gonna help you to your feet," and they helped Russia rebuild. I think they would have earned the everlasting affection and gratitude of the Russian people, and that could have been the basis for a friendly relationship. Putin asked if they could join NATO. I don't know if that would have happened, but I think they could have come to some sort of understanding or agreement. But instead, it was kind of just them laughing at Russia and saying, haha, you guys are losers. Which, I don't know. It's what is it that Machiavelli said? Um, you must. Uh, I'm just trying to find this. What Machiavelli said. Uh, People should either be caressed or crushed. If you do them minor damage, they will get their revenge. But if you cripple them, there is nothing they can do. If you need to injure someone, do it in such a way that you will not have to fear vengeance. So, like, the worst thing you can do is humiliate people because they are still able to strike back and they are going to want to do that at some point in time. So, the reality once again is if it I don't care if you like America, if you like Russia, if you think Putin's Putler, that kind of thing. I think they should have come to some sort of agreement with Russia. Like it could just something. Like I don't get why that couldn't have been accomplished. Um, it just said a lot of bitterness. that kept escalating, and you had the U.S. did all kinds of stupid shit. Like they armed the Chechens in the Caucasus. They, I think, were involved with the whole like Georgia thing. Like once again, at a certain level, this is realpolitik. Um, Russia will always consider these areas under its sphere of influence. You can think that that's fair or unfair. You can think that's imperialistic or not, but they always will. And you can either respect that and try to come to some sort of agreement. Once again, I think a neutral Ukraine was a pretty good deal for both sides. They could have been had a free trade agreement with Russia and a free trade agreement with the EU. They could have been a middleman, and I think that might have worked out pretty well for both sides. Finland joining NATO, I think, was probably a bad idea in retrospect because once again, I think there's a lot to be said for being the middleman of like it works for Hong Kong, works for Hong Kong, it works for Singapore. What are some other countries like that? Yugoslavia did a good job of that during the Cold War. They got money from the East and West. They could trade with both sides. It wasn't that bad an agreement. They could they could get the U.S. and Russia to both give them money. Um, Uruguay, yeah, Uruguay is another example. It's like it's not the worst deal in the world, and sometimes you just kind of have to accept that reality. But the U.S. had to just keep pushing, and now they've gone to Pashinyan in Armenia, and they've told him we're gonna make all your dreams come true. And I've heard rumors now that they're going to be Azerbaijan is talking about just invading Armenia proper now. Keep in mind, Armenia told Russia to go fuck themselves. So Russia is not really in the mood to defend them in at this particular point in time. I don't think they're very interested in doing that because Pashinyan wanted to be like modern and progressive and pro Europe. Why he thought that like Armenia joining the EU was going to work out and then that was going to be viable, I don't know. Um, and once again, like you didn't have to give Putin everything. You didn't have to give him everything. You didn't have to give him like you don't have to cede all of Ukraine or anything. But this idea, this post Cold War idea America has that we can never talk to anybody. We can't sit down with the North Koreans. We can't sit down with the Chinese. We can't sit down with the Russians. You can still be their enemies, but like once again, it scares the shit out of me that Russia and America aren't talking to each other. You have two nuclear power countries that are just won't even talk. It's weird. It's crazy. So I don't really know what else to tell you guys. I don't know what Ukraine's going to do. Um, sorry, just to get back to the point that I was going to make, but I kept forgetting to make. Basically, Ukraine has the only remaining card they have is to withdraw to the Dnieper and start surrender negotiations. That is, I think, pretty much all they have left. Or just to surrender, unconditionally surrender outright, or to ask for terms or something like that. I don't think there's any way Zelensky's going to remain president. Um, maybe the Ukrainian parliament can like impeach him and say, "Oh, he was a dictator," and then blame him for everything. And then he can go live in his mansion in Miami or whatever or London. That's possible. That's pretty much all that's really left um, for them to do. Because even if America gave them $1 trillion, it wouldn't change the situation on the ground. They've backed off the mobilization law. They said that they were going to mobilize like 500,000 to 1 million people. And they're like, no, we can maybe mobilize another 100,000, and it's going to be entirely males in their mid 20s. So I don't know. What do you guys think is going to happen? I'm gonna ask the chat. Like, is there going to be a stalemate? Because Russia, I think, has what it needs to end this war if they really wanted to. But the Russian general staff has shown they will not take any risks. So they might just stop after this, consolidate the area, and just wait till they feel that they're ready to go on the offensive again. Even if they could just launch a big aero offensive, like a YOLO offensive, and maybe just cause the Ukrainian army to completely collapse, I have no confidence that they're going to do that. They very well might just hold off, do another round of aggressive attrition, and then just keep inching forward. Whether or not they're ever going to do a big aero offensive is very much up in the air. But the one thing is, I don't think Russia has any interest in Western Ukraine. As I've said, I think they want Odessa, everything east of the Dnieper. I don't know the status of Kiev, but you might have a rump state in this part of the country. Europe is also having like a massive crisis. You have the Chad farmers who are bringing the entire power block to a standstill. Germany's in a recession. The America's in a recession. Sorry, UK is in a recession. I'm not sure if France is. Germany's actually deindustrializing. Now that their power has like doubled or tripled in value, you have companies going out of business. The whole thing is a mess. But once again, no one is talking other than Orban about negotiating with Russia. He's like, look, there's nothing else. Um, there's nothing else like we can do at this point in time. Let's just stop throwing good money after bad and try to come with it. So I don't know what Russia's ultimate objective is. I don't know if they're going to reach the Dnieper and stop, if they're going to feel that they need to go across it for their security situation, if any of Ukraine is going to be left, if they're going to try and do a partition deal, which I don't think is going to happen, but um, they keep periodically bringing up the idea of partitioning Western Ukraine, giving parts to Poland, Hungary, and I guess Slovakia. But we'll have to see. So I think that concludes the update on what's going on during the war. It's bad, it's rough, and that's about it. Thank you very much for watching, guys. God bless, and I hope